We are here in sunny Long Beach, California for IANA Intermodal Expo, one of the best intermodal conferences of the year at one of the busiest ports in North America. How's your experience been so far?
The experience so far has been absolutely wonderful.
What's your experience been like at Expo?
It's been incredible.
So we will see you here at Intermodal Expo 2023. Hey, supply chainers, wherever you are in the world, this is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey with you today. Are you ready? Let's talk supply chain. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Thoughts and Coffee. That's right, it's another Tuesday. My name is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. I am the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain, as well as the Blended podcast and founder of the Blended Pledge. And today we have a really, really great show for you. We've got Ryan coming up from DCLI, and we are going to be talking about, he's going to be spilling all the tea and what's happening in the chassis world. So stay tuned because there's a lot of drama going on. But first, I do need to give a shout out to our sponsor of our show. Say you're at work and all the lights flicker and then go out. You try to move and bump into something. You turn and bump into something else. You can't work like this. You need to be able to see what's happening. This is how your inventory feels. Fastenal has unique inventory solutions that sends data to the cloud and help you avoid stockouts while not carrying excess inventory. Don't stay in the dark. Let Fastenal shine a light on the parts and supplies that keep your business running. Go to fastenal.com/LTSC and see how they do it. All right, let's get to what is happening with Let's Talk Supply Chain this week. So we've got a brand new Woman in Supply Chain episode for you with Juliette Sampson. Now, she talks all about her journey. She talks about when she was ready to take the leap into some of the amazing positions she's been able to have at some really, really big companies. So make sure you go and check out this episode. It was episode 342, wherever you listen to the show, because Juliette's journey is definitely transformational and very inspiring. We're already getting some amazing feedback from that as well. What else have we got? Oh, we've got DC. So DC is coming up on Friday with Action Items, her show about leveraging strategic operational partnerships to scale. Now, go and click the attend button. Even if you cannot attend in real time, we are going to send you the link. So go and click on the attend button. DC always has an amazing show and has some really great guests. So go and check that out. All right. So I want to talk about a couple of other things. I was on Great Quarter Gals on Freight Waves last week with Kaylee and Grace. Want to say thank you to them for having me on the show. We talked about women in supply chain, diversity, collaboration, some of the hot topics in supply chain. If you didn't check it out, it's over on my personal LinkedIn. Plus, I want to say thank you to all of you. We just hit 300,000 views on our YouTube channel and 63,000 followers on the Let's Talk Supply Chain LinkedIn page. Tomorrow, we've got a huge announcement coming out. So make sure that you go and check out the Let's Talk Supply Chain social media because you're not going to want to miss that. And we're launching the Secret Society of Supply Chain at the end of this month. So if you haven't joined the wait list, go and check that out as well. Well, without further ado, we've got a lot to talk about today. So I'm going to bring up Ryan, our guest. Hello, Ryan. Thanks so much for joining me.
Good morning. Hey, does this get me front of the line on that Secret Society thing? Or
well, you gotta join the wait list to find out. But what I will tell you is for one of the groups, we are going to be giving away custom Air Force One. So you definitely want to get your name in there.
All right.
So tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ryan Hofek, CMO for DCLI, Direct Chassis Link. 20 27 years in supply chain, mostly with railroad intermodal side of the house with CSX and Norfolk Southern. Worked for an ocean carrier, and then in the last 6 years, I've worked on the asset side, on the chassis side, and so now run commercial at DCLI. We have about 275,000 chassis, 150,000 marine, 125,000 domestic. So we get to touch both sides of intermodal and kind of get the full view.
Well, and you have also DCLI and the team over at DCLI have put in like an investment of $2 billion. Not only do you have 275,000 chassis, you're investing a ton of time, energy, and money into this sector of supply chain.
Yeah, chassis are they're expensive, they're needy, they wander off, they're extremely capital intensive, and we sort of, I guess our claim to supply chain fame was chassis on the marine side. We're all owned by the ocean carriers, and that was sort of an infamous period of time when they were an albatross on the ocean carriers, which means they were underinvested and undercapitalized, poor condition. There was really no love for the trucker and understanding of the consequence of a bad chassis at the driver level, all those things. So we came in, and then sort of private enterprise came in and created stiff competition, which then drove investment and serving our customers, which is what we're all here to do. And we're no different in that regard.
Yeah, amazing. And we're going to be talking about some of those investments coming up near the end of the show. So stay tuned for that. Now, I want to talk to you about the poll. So we do a poll of the week every single Wednesday morning, and DCLI sponsored the poll last week because we really wanted to know where everybody stood on this particular question. So the question we asked everybody: do you think the FMC should regulate chassis and in turn mandate IEP's fleet into gray pools managed by third party? Well, 52% of you said no, we should not expand. 29% of you said it needs federal regulation. And 17% of you said yes to government oversight. Now, let me just talk to you a little bit about the poll that I had as well. So I show 69% over on my personal LinkedIn, 69% no, we should not expand. And then I was tied. 15% it needs federal regulation, and 15% comment your opinion. So talk to me about this, Ryan. What does this particular question mean for the industry, and what do those answers really tell us?
So I guess a couple of things. For perspective, I mean, the government is certainly trying to help. There's obviously a well-meaning facet to what they're doing at the FMC level, which is sort of the federal agency that has it oversees this realm. And after 2+ years in the pandemic situation, there's a belief that there needs to be fundamental change. Chassis are not the only part of the story. And then, it's the government's idea, hey, we're the government, we're here to help. Again, I say that a little bit tongue in cheek. I do think there is strong, good intentions there. What I'd like to maybe talk about is sort of what problem it is they think they're going to solve, number one. And number two, even before all that, there is an organization that is actually trying to push for financial gain. I think that last part where I say their own financial gain is probably not as aware, there's not as much awareness on that as I'd like there to be. So I want to talk about that if we could.
Yeah, absolutely. We can definitely talk about that. I mean, at the end of the day, he's gone. Okay, well, he's going to come back. So while we wait for Ryan to come back, I do want to mention that, we always need to, there you are. You're back.
Back.
Awesome. So what I was going to say is that we always need to see what the motivation is behind everything. I feel like there's two sides to every story, and then the truth is somewhere in the middle. And I think part of what really came out of the pandemic in the last couple of years is how much information is out there, but it's hard to disseminate what's true, what's not true. And so a lot of opinions and perspectives are made over disinformation. So talk to us a little bit about that and why that's so detrimental to supply chains and what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, I'll try to be as distilled as I can. I mean, as in anything, when there's a movement, one of the things you should be skeptical about is who gains from that, right? And so follow the money. In that first article, there's a reference to an organization called NACPAC, and fundamentally, what a gray pool allows them to do is to take chassis that are pooled into a gray model with this third-party neutral organization, which would include our assets that we've invested in. So the issue is we invest in our assets, we try to differentiate with our customers with our assets, and all of a sudden they're stuck inside of a gray pool. And all your differentiation and all your investment is lost upon you and your customers. So everybody gets the benefit of that. So you have a free rider problem. That's one problem with gray. And then ultimately what this organization does, they have not made $2 billion investment in chassis. They do not have a fleet at the scale of ours. They do not have the personnel that we have. We have 450 people coast to coast. They do not have the billing systems that we have. So they benefit from a third party that does all the billing. They benefit from my chassis. And in this construct, when their customer uses my chassis, they get paid. They get the benefit of my investment. They get the benefit of my asset. So it catapults them. So without having made the $2 billion that we've made investment, they get all of a sudden catapulted to be a competitor of mine at my level. And they've used the ATA and its powerful connections in Washington to lobby and sue and to achieve that goal. Under the false, here's the key thing, and I saw this in one of the comments in the survey. There's a false flag being waved here, which is, hey, poor truck. This is for the poor trucker. This is for the benefit of the trucker because DCLI and the other IEPs are blocking chassis choice, and that could not be farther from the truth. In a grounded terminal environment, marine terminal or rail terminal, any trucker can go get any chassis, and that forces me to be competitive. I have to compete on price. I have to compete on asset quality, on availability, on ease of doing business. All those fundamental aspects of why I win or lose in the marketplace are decided when that trucker can take a left or take a right and go choose a track chassis or a flexi chassis or a backpack chassis or my chassis. That choice is alive and well and driving that investment that I was talking to you about. A gray pool, I don't invest anymore. I'm not even sure I have chassis in that pool anymore because I can't even get the benefit of my asset. My competitor can. So ultimately, this sort of unintended consequence is fewer chassis, poorer quality, the spirit of competition gone because you've effectively socialized a private enterprise. And where is the flag waving on socializing drayage or socializing the railroads or those aspects? So that's the part I think that the misinformation is that truckers don't have choice, that shippers don't have choice. They do. Now, there is one exception. And that is at a facility, particularly a railroad, that is a wheeled operation. The railroad, for its own operational benefit, will match containers to chassis outside of my control. And then when that customer sends in their trucker to get that container chassis mix, it's already sort of preordained. And for them to then say, well, I'd rather use that chassis from that company, they have to pay the railroad to switch the loads over, and it's sort of impractical. There is no deal between us and the railroads that drives that. It is purely a railroad operational convenience issue. And that is the only time there is no choice per se in the market.
Well, so I'm glad that you're bringing this up because I think obviously when we get into the articles, and maybe we'll get into the articles now. I was going to do a bit of a market update, but I think we'll get into the articles because we're talking about that right now. So I'm going to bring that up right now. So the first article is a DCLI article, and it talks about taking the right lessons from the pandemic and the supply chain disruption. Now, one of the things that I talk about is collaboration is the future of business. And one thing that this particular article talks about is how there's 7 companies involved in container shipping. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of hands. And there's a lot that can go right. There's a lot that can go wrong. Right. And so I'm glad that we're having this discussion because at the end of the day, if this is the kind of discussion that is happening at the moment and the kind of options right, that are being provided to the industry, this is a discussion that people need to get behind. They need to understand the nuances of it. They need to understand what's going to be better for them and what's not going to be better for them. And then people can make those choices and decisions for themselves. So I'm glad that we're talking about this, because I don't think a lot of people know about this particular conversation that is happening and how it can actually affect them. So let's take a look at this particular article, because you mentioned it. There was an update on April 19th, right? Talk to us about the update, because I believe you said that there's been some lobbying going on. There's been some misinformation. I think from that poll question, we're looking at, is the government going to get involved? Is the government not going to get involved? Is that good for me? Is it not good for me? Talk to me about the update and where we're at currently on this particular topic.
Yeah, so it's funny when you're doing your lead in for this segment, you said there's drama, and you're right. There is drama around chassis.
Spill the tea.
I wish there wasn't, but there is. And so there's a little bit of drama here. What it's saying is the ATA has a division of the American Trucking Association called the IMCC, which is the Intermodal Carrier Conference, I think. Mm-hmm. They have filed a lawsuit to sort of with the end game of getting an ALJ, which is an executive branch judge, to make a decision that ultimately informs new regulation from the FMC regulating chassis, creating this gray pool that I've talked about. Underpinning the IMCC is NACPAC. Sort of NACPAC's leadership was all part of the IMCC, the board of the IMCC that's driving this agenda. And then sort of adverse to that, the CEO of NACPAC had said something to the effect of that chassis pools should be driven by competition, not government intervention. So bit of a contradiction in what they're doing and what they're saying that we wanted to point out. Again, there's a little bit of drama there.
Okay. I think
so we thought that was interesting that he said something that we're saying, but their action is extraordinarily different. I just to make sure, this is sort of fact is stranger than fiction. Mm-hmm. There is a movement that would socialize a private enterprise to the benefit of somebody. Let me quickly just use that rental car model we were talking about. If you went into a car rental.
So hold on, let's premise that for just a second. So in this article, you talk about how DCLI actually operates like a rental car, but you do it with chassis. So talk to us about this model and why it works, and give us some context on that.
It's just a basic statement about what happens when you force gray. Gray is just a euphemism for sort of the socialization of a particular private enterprise. And all we're saying is, let's say Hertz is sort of the gold standard. They have the nicest cars, they're sort of more expensive, and then you got, I don't know, Thrifty or Dollar or something like that. And so if you were to go in there as a consumer and pull out a Hertz Cadillac and pay Thrifty for a Ford Fiesta, how long are there going to be Cadillacs and that kind of thing in this, and that is exactly, it's hard to even imagine that that's actually what's being discussed here. And that is what's being discussed here. Again, fact is stranger than fiction. And again, the way they're getting support is this wolf in sheep's clothing, which is, hey, the trucker should have the ultimate choice, and this gray model is the only way to do that. And that is simply a fabrication. It's just not true.
So what can people do to get informed so that they can make a decision on this? And how do they get involved to make sure that obviously whatever is right for the industry is being done?
I mean, the first thing is just self-reflect on what a gray pool really is. What exactly are we saying by we're asking the federal government to mandate a gray pool upon the private enterprise, and make sure that that's aligned with your values as a American, and then think about what are the consequences, as I've said, using that metaphor that analogy with the rental car models. How often will the companies that are investing the money continue to invest in supply? We just came out of a supply shock on chassis over the last 2.5 years. What was lost in all that was when a chassis leaves a terminal, the time it leaves and takes to come back is around 5 days, back in 2019, say. During the pandemic, it shot up to 12. So what that does is it more than cuts your fleet capacity in half overnight. What system can tolerate a 50% or a 50% reduction in its capacity? But the truth is, our system absorbed 50% growth overnight, which is pretty amazing. It wasn't enough because the dwell time was so extreme because of labor, because of warehouse capacity, and all the myriad reasons, and it all backed up and it just sort of snowballed on itself. And so that sort of created the opportunism for people to see they're failing, they're not managing their capacity and all these things. And it creates that sort of oxygen for nefarious intenders to kind of come out there with their agendas and kind of deceive people around what they're really up to.
Okay. So I think really at the end of the day, we need to get informed, right? We need to be able to understand what is happening. What is the fight? What's good for us as supply chain professionals, as organizations who have supply chains that depend on chassis. And like you said, the pandemic is a very good example of that, because we saw the crunch in capacity. We saw what happens when we don't have enough chassis. I mean, we're going to see what's going to happen when we don't have enough truckers as well, right? We've got a few things that are sort of churning and happening in supply chain that we're going to see the effects of, or we have seen the effects. And so what is the solution moving forward for
And
this?
does anyone really believe that forcing drayage in the thousands and thousands of draymen into a gray pool, is that going to create more drivers and more trucks? I mean,
I don't know. And I think that is what I was kind of asking you, right? What are the questions that we need to be asking ourselves? How do we get informed? How do we get involved so that we can make sure that the right things are happening for us or the shippers or the organizations, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think you've done a really good job at doing that. And so I want to move on to our next article, because we do have a couple more to get to. So recently, the G7 finance chiefs are talking about moving to diversify supply chain. Now, this one talks a lot about the chip shortage and how the U.S. is talking about it as being a national security concern. And so they've put together a new initiative called RISE, which is Resilient and Inclusive Supply Chain Enhancement, bringing together France, Germany, UK, Canada, Italy, and Europe as well in talks by the end of this year to figure out what this RISE initiative looks like. I'm not even sure they know all the details yet either, but I do want to put it on everybody's radar. Do you have any comments on this, Ryan? What do you think?
I just goes back to I'm more, I guess the optimist side of me says, look what we accomplished during the supply chain, during the pandemic. Look what we actually did. It was extraordinary. Americans were buying massive amounts of goods and refurbishing their home offices and all those things. So we overloaded the system with more demand than it has ever seen, while the labor that underpins the supply chain is dealing with COVID and their families and all these terrible things that made the labor side of the equation so challenging, which was already constrained in the market. It seemed terrible on the surface, but I'm just an optimist about what actually was accomplished. And so when the governments get together and say we need to fix the supply chain, I worry about how knowledgeable they really are on how the handoffs actually work really well, complex as they are, on the intelligence and on the incredible people that underpin the supply chain. I mean, I'm blown away. I'm one of the few people that I grew up with and went to college with that is in the supply chain, and I'd put the people that I've dealt with in my career above anybody on Wall Street or anywhere else, any law firms, et cetera. I'm really actually quite impressed with what everybody on this call did, with what happened, in light of how it didn't feel good, because it was still a bit too much for the system to take. But I don't know, it just makes me nervous. I'm not like a full libertarian, government regulation's bad. I'm not. But this just feels a little bit like a solution looking for a problem.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, thinking about the frontline workers and the heroes in supply chain that really got us through, you know, the pandemic, what they've been through, what we need to go through, you know, for it'll be interesting to see what comes out of these discussions and what sort of comes down the pipe. Like, I understand from a chip perspective, maybe some pharma, right? Some medication and things like that. The pandemic brought to light some of these particular shortages that could really put countries in compromising positions in the future, depending on what can happen. So it'll be interesting to see what they think is a diverse and resilient supply chain, who they've consulted, who they've spoken to, and what sort of comes out of this discussion. Now,
but if it's about microchips and those kind of things, I think that's right. There were some vulnerabilities exposed, and I do think that is probably a government level conversation for sure.
Now, before we get to the last article, I have a question over on my personal LinkedIn, Corey, and I want to give a shout out to Corey. When has government oversight helped in business when the problem is industry related? Owning your own equipment is the key to change. What do you think about that?
So one of the solutions that has happened in the chassis space is truckers have gotten their own chassis, and the pools have become a part of the capacity equation, but not the only source of capacity. And so I think that's market forces. Another example of market forces working very, very well, where truckers will say, I've got these customers that are extremely consistent, so I can have a fleet of chassis that I can keep spinning and use the pool for overflow or more inconsistent customers. And that's great. That's great. I mean, that's market forces working. And I think his comment or her comment is right.
Well, and I think that leads into our last article, which is from DCLI again. The reason why we're talking about this, and we only have about 2 minutes. So investing in a great trucker experience. So I think this also goes to show from our previous discussion on the first article is that investment does matter. So what are you investing in? Why does it matter to us? What does it mean for the industry?
Yeah, so when we bought all those chassis from the ocean carriers, they were very sort of insular and they were just about serving their operations. We've had to really do a 180, even though we were born out of the ocean carriers, and focus on the driver. Much more granular, much more difficult, but it matters. What kind of tires does it have on there? What kind of lights does it have on there? What's the brake stroke? I mean, it's extremely, because that will affect that driver's ability to do 3 turns that day instead of 2. What's the road service when things do go wrong? What's your road service experience? How quickly can you get them rolling? So it is all aspects of the chassis at a driver level, because that's what matters. And that's, again, sort of market forces are forcing our hand to be very, very trucker centric, because they'll go get their own chassis, because they'll stop using the pool, or because they'll go use my competitor's pool. And again, I think that's what everybody wants. Happy drivers, I think underpin everything in our supply chain. So that's our point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we've talked about, the experience of being a truck driver. We've talked about on this show, but previously we've also talked about the shortage that we have. And so we want to make it an appealing career choice for people, because supply chains need truck drivers, and they were the unsung heroes as well of the pandemic, moving all those products, keeping supply chains going. And so I really like to see the investment, not only in chassis, and like you said, they're very needy, so there's maintenance and all that kind of stuff, but really that trucker experience. What is it like for every single person along that supply chain? What is it like for the trucker's experience? How can we be a part of that solution and growing that pool of people, growing that career choice for people to decide to make that part of their journey. Anyways, so that was a great conversation. I do want to let everybody know what we have coming up and where we're going to be. So next week, I'm going to be at Home Delivery World in the Media Zone. I'm going to be on stage a couple of times, once with Seco, once with Reveal. I'm also going to be in our booth recording some episodes for Let's Talk Supply Chain, as well as the Secret Society of Supply Chain, some exclusive content. So if you're there, come and say hello. And then, of course, we've got DC coming up on Friday. So Ryan, thank you so much for coming on the show, giving us the tea, talking to us about some of this drama that's happening in chassis. Hopefully, we have been able to inform people, give people the resources to go and, check out what's happening and get involved, because at the end of the day, it's going to take us all to make this industry amazing. And we've got amazing people. We want to make it even more amazing. So Ryan, I really appreciate you coming on the show today. And to everybody who was watching, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Sarah.